All right, our Hangout on Air is live. This is Way here from the Six Figure Academy. Hopefully, this is the first time we're doing this. We're doing it on YouTube, doing a live YouTube broadcast of our weekly radio show, The Money Lab podcast, live. And I thought I'd jump on here real quick just before the noon, 12 o'clock hour, so that I can make sure I get myself situated here, making sure that we get our notifications out. Our social media team is getting this handled. You would laugh if you saw the way I have this jimmied up in my sound booth right now to make sure that I'm not staring down the whole time while I'm doing this particular episode. So it's top of the hour. Let me go ahead and get started. I need to flip this over to kind of see all that we're doing here. Let me do this. Okay. And we're going to get started. So if you happen to be hearing our our radio show on Spreaker.com, may want to tune into that so you can hear all the cool, fun music. Other than that, stay tuned for a little bit while I go ahead and get this show on the road. Okay. All right, welcome to the Money Lab Live Podcast, episode number 36, Money Anxiety Around Salary. All right, welcome back to another live broadcast of the Money Lab podcast. I'm your host, Wei Hong from the Six Figure Academy. And this is the podcast where we give you real world tips, strategies, and interviews with other entrepreneurs on how to re engineer bad money stories and habits so that you can create a prosperous and an abundant lifestyle free of financial stress and worry. Now, if you're going to be joining us live today, like we are today, if you happen to be on Google, hey, what's up? The camera is live. Make sure you get on Spreaker.com or download the Spreaker app and search for the hashtag The Money Lab so that you can join us in the chat room and ask questions and interact with us. And when we have a guest, you can interact with our guest. Now, while you're there, subscribe so that you don't miss an episode and you can catch us every week. For all other ways to find us, go to the sixfigureacademy.com/radio for all the details. And for those of you who happen to find us on Google Hangouts Live, this is the first time we're actually doing the show live on Google. Thank you. Big shout out to our social media director, Jennifer Stinnett from eGen Solutions. She's the one that set it all up. So hopefully this will be a new fun thing that we get to do. Okay, so let me go ahead and see what it looks like on here. Yes, we're still live. I think, wait, it says you present to everyone. That's weird. Hopefully this is working. Let's see. Okay, if I do this, turns the camera off, turns the camera on. Okay, cool. All right, so anyway, back to the program. So today we are going to be talking about a couple things. One, I want to give a heads up. Once again, we're constantly here at the Six Figure Academy kind of evaluating how we're showing up, what we're doing for people out there, how we're serving in the best way. And one of the things that we look at all the time is the statistics around this podcast show. This radio show, just to see, how are people engaging, whether or not they're engaged, and looking at opportunities of how we can broaden the information that we can get together and the type of people we could bring on the show to give you, the listener, a higher value for the time that you're spending. Okay, because you can choose to spend time to do all kinds of things. And the fact that you're choosing time to listen to the show, to watch the show over here on Google Hangouts, I want to make sure that you get the most out of it. Okay, we all want to do here at the Six Figure Academy. So one of the things that we are considering doing is, once again, changing the name again from the Money Lab over to the Entrepreneurs Lab, because really a lot of what we do, okay, aside from the money piece, the money anxiety piece, the bad money story piece, is I'm gonna turn something on here. Okay, is to basically help entrepreneurs achieve freedom. Okay, now granted, in the beginning, we're helping them achieve financial freedom, But what happens after you achieve financial freedom? What else is next? And the reason why we continue to get, to work with our clients is because we're helping our clients achieve freedom over all. Okay. So really, really important. So that's why just want to give you a heads up. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden next week or the week after our show turns into from the money lab to the entrepreneurs lab. And which will give me like kind of like a free reign approach to, bring all kinds of different entrepreneurs on the show to share their insights, share their genius, share their capabilities to help you, the entrepreneur on the other side of this show, to kind of glean some of the information and knowledge from the best of the best that I bring in. So look out for that in the near future. But today, let's talk about the topic of the money anxiety around salary. Okay. And it's kind of interesting because most of the time we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking to entrepreneurs about income, and most entrepreneurs don't see themselves paying themselves a salary, but the reality is they probably should, especially if you open a corporation like a C corp, an S corp. How you pay yourself as an entrepreneur is in the form of a salary, primarily in a C corp. I'm currently in the process of launching yet another company, and it's going to be right from the get-go a C corp, and we have to actually do something that's different than some of the other LLCs I've done in the past, which is, it's not a draw, we have to designate an actual salary. Fascinating. So it's a cool kind of thing. So I figured the topic today, when we talk about it, we should probably talk about this article that spurred this topic today is from health.com. So I always kind of peruse the internet to kind of look for where the world is at right now when it comes to money. I have this fascination about money anxiety, bad money stories and everything like that. And I found this particular article that basically was talking about stress around salary, debt, spending habits, and here's what you should know about it and everything like that. So this was just last month, I think this came out, and there was a PhD psychologist in New York City that basically said, talked about one of the reasons why money can make us frazzled, especially most of us going into the holiday season. They've done studies where the levels of anxiety and stress around money kind of escalate even before the holidays actually get here. A lot of times people are buying into the fact that in the holiday season, they have to spend money, they have to buy gifts, they have to do all these different things. And so there's some linkage there, right? And so what this Chloe Carmichael says, she's a PhD, like I said, psychologist in New York City. She goes, money is really a resource that can provide people with a sense of safety and security. Now, any of you who know me that talk about safety and security as a value, anybody who's driven by safety and security, there is a negative association built into that word, especially security. Okay. Security is kind of like avoidance. It's kind of like to avoid something that's negative. And when you think about something negative, it creates a negative internal representation in your mind, which if you've heard me say it before, our unconscious mind has a trouble, kind of processing. But the next part of what she says is when we feel that resources is scarce, it can actually make people feel like their survival is in jeopardy on a very primal level. And what we're talking about here is what happens when, our need for survival, the fight or flight, is kind of a vestige. It's left over. It was developed as a way to kind of keep humanity alive back in the day when saber-toothed tigers and lions and tigers and bears would literally be at the doorstep chasing us down, and then we have to fight to survive. If you look at snakes, for example, and if you look at snakes very closely, you'll notice little vestiges. They call it vestiges, where there's like evidence of where snakes evolved from, where they used to have legs. It typically looks like like a bit of a toenail or something like that. And then what happens is if you go through it, and you'll find these things on snakes so that you can see where snakes evolved from. They evolved from the lizard. Okay. So we're kind of the same way. When we have that fight or flight, that stress, that anxiety, the worry around things that we know we shouldn't have to be worried about, or we know, for example, like money, right? It's a vestige. It's a leftover knee-jerk reaction that's built into almost our genetic DNA to fight or flight in a circumstance. And then what happens is the modern man takes our thinking process to try to kind of make sense and justify the existence of that feeling. Okay, so we've been cultivated in this society to treat money that way, that it can actually make people feel like their survival is in jeopardy. Okay, now just in case, for those of you who are on Spreaker.com and are joining us live, okay, if I talk about anything or if you ever want to ask any questions, there is a live chat window that you can just go in there, punch in your questions and everything like that, and I'll see it. And even after the show is done, and I'll mention this again, you can still punch it on there because our team is always looking for comments that have come up after the show. Okay. So this article basically talks about, yeah, easier said than done, right? But your finances don't have to be scary. But for a lot of people, it is. What I don't necessarily agree with is this other psychotherapist named Matt Lundquist, and I don't want to throw him under the bus, but I'm just saying I don't agree, so we can agree to disagree. He says some financial anxiety can actually be a good motivator. Okay. Basically, he goes, if a certain situation makes you feel appropriately anxious, it can be helpful in getting you to make a necessary change. So if you've been around me long enough, you'll know that the best way to kind of get your butt off the couch or get your butt to do something is kind of a negative driver, negative motivator. So in that particular regard, I agree with what he's saying, is that we can use financial anxiety as a good motivator. The problem is saying that and doing that are two separate, totally different things. If you were not raised to have financial anxiety to be used as a tool, as a good motivator, just telling somebody it's telling an adult who was raised as a child to believe otherwise to do it is easier said than done, and this is my biggest challenge with a lot of people out there who are saying, oh, come on, it's a logical thing, but our entire being is built on more than just logic. If that were the case, then nobody would be suffering, nobody would be broke, nobody would be poor, nobody would have any financial stress or worry if logic and just thinking that, okay, great, that's how it's supposed to be. We have to kind of look deeper than that. Okay, so he goes on and say, for example, realizing you overspent last weekend may prompt you to rethink your budget, while feeling nervous about a big upcoming expense could lead you to put aside more than you need. But financial anxiety becomes a problem if it's constantly on your mind and starts to disrupt other aspects of your life. So, so in a way, he kind of just, like all clinicians do, they just kind of state facts. They don't really provide a solution per se. They're just kind of observing what's going on. And this is my biggest challenge with a lot of people who put things out there and said that talking about our challenges and our problems, they're really good at pointing out what's wrong. But not very many people are taking the time to kind of go forth and say, now that you know what's wrong, now that you know that's what's possibility, I mean, a lot of people read this and go, duh, right? So what do I do about it, right? And so it goes further down and they talk about some pros, what they outline on how to take care of things. And they broke it down to three basic things. They talk about savings, anxiety around savings, job security, and salary. Before I get into this, here's the thing is that, how do we then take this? And I keep talking about how the challenges around the clinician world is they talk about all these different problems, they point it out, and they, sometimes they point out the obvious, and then we sit there and we go, yeah, but then what, right? And it's kind of like what I was saying here is that if you grew up with a certain set of tools that you were taught by your family, by your parents, by your friends, by your environment, then that's what needs to be addressed. Okay. If you notice that there is a problem, first you want to acknowledge the fact that, okay, great, here's a challenge in my life. Okay. Now the question is, what do I do about it? Right? How do I do about it? Is I gotta find out where I learned how to behave this way. Okay, when he talks about here is like, if you overspent last weekend, you may prompt you to rethink your budget. But if you just do this strategy and just rethink your budget, chances are it's the decision to overspend last weekend has nothing to do with your budget. Okay, I want you to think about that for a moment. The decision to overspend last weekend that may prompt you to rethink your budget has nothing to do with your budget. And even if you rethink your budget, you're going to find a way to overspend again, and then you'll go back to rethink your budget. It's kind of like this hamster, this constant cycle. Okay. And this is a lot of what we talk about here at the Six Figure Academy, that there is a story that runs there that justifies you to overspend. And that's why we want to acknowledge ourselves and give ourselves credit for overspending, because there's a part of you, if you did overspend last weekend, that overspent because it served a purpose. Now, if you like, for the next one, he talks about when you're feeling nervous about a big upcoming expense that could lead you to put more aside than you need, what's going to happen is this, is that when you put aside more than you need, is that really the solution for feeling nervous? Nobody likes to feel anxious, nervous, and stressed, because that raises your blood pressure, that creates disease in your body over time. If you're constantly stressing and worried about big upcoming expenses, life tends to have that. Life tends to give you a ton of that, to just have, things happening over and over again. Okay, so you want to look back as well. How do you know to get nervous or to stress or to worry about big upcoming expenses? That's the big thing. That's where you can solve the problem. By creating like a rethinking your budget or having a better savings plan and everything is all fine and dandy, but it only addresses one thing. It addresses the adult learning capability, the adult mindset, but it's not the adult mindset that has driven you to overspend. It's not the adult mindset that's driving you, that's telling you to be stressed or anxious or nervous about big upcoming expense. It's typically something that you learned and observed or were taught from your childhood. Okay. And this is really kind of the point that I always want to get to when I read these articles and I see these, this is cool and it's giving people some, good starting points, but it's almost like smoke and mirrors to kind of avoid the deeper, more challenging way to solve the problem. And this is where people avoid, is that people want a quick fix, people want a quick solution, but what it does, it just buries the deeper problem, the real problem, and just kind of perpetuate this insanity, if you will. Okay. So I want to really kind of make it a point for you to kind of see that. So before I jump into what this article is talking about on health.com, and if you're just joining us, what we're talking about today is the money anxiety around salary. Okay. So this article talks about, savings. It talks about job security, talks about salary. I want to kind of, I'll touch really quickly on the other things. I mean, it talks about savings and a budget, reworking your budget, opening different types. They're all talking about strategies. And there's a really cool book out there that I absolutely highly recommend. It's called The Automatic Millionaire. It talks about, it's basically geared towards people who have trouble saving. They spend their life there. They know they have to save. Logically, they've been taught different tactics and techniques on how to save, and they still can't save. And the automatic millionaire says there are some people who just aren't wired to just kind of remember to save. I'm one of those people. And the way to do it is to use technology to create automation in what you know that needs to be done. Obviously, initially, it's a painful process. Like, okay, I got to allocate this. I got to take 10% out. I got to do this and that. And the first couple times you're doing it, you're just like, oh, but quite frankly, if you can't live off 90% of your income, then that's money anxiety. If you believe that you can't survive off 90% of your income and not be willing to make adjustments in your life so that you can make that happen. But anyway, so what happens is that, you start putting that process together, and it's like, I think David Bach is the name of the guy who wrote the book Automatic Millionaire. I highly recommend it for those of you who struggle with it, because here's the thing. When you automate it, yeah, sure, in the beginning, it's just as painful to kind of feel like, oh, I got to take this money aside. I got to put it over here. I could have used this money for that, but I got to put it to savings, pay myself in the future. All these different little tactics and mindset things that people tell you. But what happens is, because it's on automation, you don't have to experience this painful process over and over again. And eventually it gets to a point where you don't even have to think about it anymore. Contrary to that is people who aren't geared or wired to like consciously put money aside every single month. And every time you do, it's a painful process. What you do is every single month, it's that painful process over and over again. Okay. How we resolve our challenges and stress and our worries around money stems from our willingness to kind of acknowledge, how is it that we were raised? What are our challenges, and why we adopted certain type of behavior problems and approaches and just reactions to things that have to do with money. Okay, so we want to really kind of pay attention to that. That's actually a really, really big deal. Just want to check my windows real quick to make sure there are no questions that are flying in, and if there are, feel free to pipe them in, okay? Whether you're on Google Live or you are on Spreaker.com, okay? All right. So that's the thing about savings. But today we're not talking about savings. We're talking about salary. Okay. Now there's always stress and worry, financial stress about job security. Like, will I lose my job? Will my business be successful this year? Um, this guy, same guy, Lundquist goes, work worries are often related to financial stress. That's again pointing out the obvious. This fear tends to be historical, he says. You might especially concerned about job security if you're laid off in the past or if your parents had job trouble when you're growing up. This part I kind of agree with when he talks about it. Not so much laid off in the past, but more so if your parents had job trouble when you were growing up. So if you grew up in a household where financial stress and worry anxiety was a common thing and it was talked about and it was felt and it was emotionally charged, then there's a high likelihood that you will find a way to represent that in your own life as an adult. Okay. This is how we solve challenges and problems around money anxiety. We don't go to the tactics first. We don't go to the strategies on how to rethink your budget or redo this and that, whatever the case may be. Yeah, technology is great to help us gloss over the fact that there's some deeper issues because we could just automate and use technology to take care of those things, which is a lot of what I do. But if you truly want to be a you know to truly eliminate the problem, in when it comes to money, you have to go deeper. You have to be willing to go much deeper than just to, rethink your budget or change your saving strategy or do things for job security and everything like that. One of the things they talk about job security is speak to your boss about the state of your company and ask for feedback to make sure you're performing well, may boost your confidence. And here's the thing. I love how they say that there's a disclaimer thing that, well, may boost your confidence. And while counterintuitive, it may also be helpful to force yourself to imagine, force yourself. In case you don't know, I have a background in neurolinguistics. I'm a trainer in neurolinguistics and programming and stuff like that. So I'm always paying attention to the word choice that people use. So I'm looking at this article right here and it says, speaking to your boss about the state of your company and asking for feedback to make sure you're performing well may boost your confidence. And that's a very clinical way to approach and not have responsibility for the statement that you're making. People who aren't trained in linguistics, they may just like ignore that and they'll just take that as truth. So they'll just drop the well and the may and they'll say, speaking to your boss, and they'll get feedback to make sure you're performing will boost your confidence. And then if it doesn't, then they're like wondering what's going on. And then I think there's something wrong with them. Okay. So this is kind of my gripe with how, this irresponsible use of language sometimes when people put it out there. Am I too much on a soapbox? Let me know. I'll be more than happy to tone it back a little bit. Okay. And he over here says, and while counterintuitive, it may also be helpful to force yourself to imagine what it would actually be like if you lost your job. Now, here's the thing. There's the word force. Nobody wants to force themselves to do anything. Nobody wants to force someone else to do anything. Force, just that word is like there is going to just immediately get people to like, no, I don't want to do it. Right? I mean, think about it. When you hear the word force, you might want to force yourselves. Like, anybody want to force themselves to do anything? Okay. Now, granted, if you really have to do something, you said, and you might use the word yourself, it's because you're doing something you don't really feel inclined to do. So if someone they're trying to give you a solution, and while it's counterintuitive, it might be helpful to force. So again, it might be, but it may not even have any kind of end result. Helpful to force yourself to imagine what it would actually be like if you lost your. See, the reason why people structure it this way, clinicians especially, people who have like their reputation on hold and they're putting these articles out and stuff like that, it's so vanilla down and so non-committal because there's a fear state of being taken the wrong way, and all of a sudden we live in a sue happy world and then they get sued. It's a kind of a funny thing. But just kind of reading between the lines of what's being said here is that people they're throwing out theories. They're throwing out, well, you could try this. Or you could try this, it gets people to think about the career options, what their saving situation. So this section right here about job security, apart from the part when it talks about the parents and had job trouble when you're growing up, then I would just kind of like take it as a grain of salt, because it says here, it gets people to think about their career options, what their saving situations is, if they would need to move, sell something, switch industries, or ask for help from family. For most people, they recognize they are a number of levels away from actually ending up on the street, but they're operating on an emotional level as if the stakes are in fact that high. again, this is a just kind of like, this is how it is. This is potentially an explanation of why things are, but because there's so many like back doors created here, you basically can just look at it as theory, okay, as opposed to actionable solutions type of thing. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but you know, let's go with it. Okay. So, okay, so here's what we got here. So let's go to the meat of what we're going to be talking about today. What the title of today's show, which is money anxiety around salary. So let's talk about the salaries piece right here. So, the other clinician, Carmichael, she goes, how much money you make can feel like a personal reflection of your worth, which unfortunately most of us are raised with. I still remember going to these family functions where parents with their kids who have young adults who have entered the workforce, they're actually comparing the salaries between kids to determine where they should line up in terms of how great the child is doing. My child is making 50,000 a year now. They came out of school and maybe they said they were going to pay him 80,000 a year now, and they pretend to be humble about it, but really they're glowing and gloating all across the board. And it was fascinating for me to see, even back then as a child, to see how now all of a sudden what the parents now walked away with, they had a sense of, I'm a good parent, I'm a bad parent, this is what my child is worth. And then the children picking up on that energy will then grow up thinking that how much money I make and the salary is a direct reflection of my own personal worth, which is why people get so fearful about changes in their salary, whether or not they're growing. Okay, so all of a sudden, if you don't get that raise that you got, that means you're not growing, which is completely hogwash. But unfortunately, our society has groomed most of us to kind of feel and think that way. Okay. And it says here, and when you're anxious about money, your salary can contribute to feelings of low self-esteem. If we feel, agreed, if we feel like we don't have as much money as our neighbors, there's that comparison piece that comes in here. That can sometimes feel like a source of shame, she says. On some level, we might think it means we're not worth as much, literally. So this whole segment right here that Carmichael talks about, I completely would agree with, and then basically she goes, if you want to stay in your current line of work, what she recommends is trying to focus on other aspects of her job that are fulfilling. See, I can resonate a little bit more than the other guy. But if your career isn't giving you that sense of fulfillment and a higher salary is a priority, that's okay too. What you need and want from a job can change over time. Pursuing a new career path is one option, as is asking for a raise. Salary negotiations make many people anxious. And oh, here's Lundquist now. That guy says the key is to recognize your value to your employer. Sometimes even going on an interview with a headhunter, even if you don't plan on changing jobs, can help you realize what you're bringing to the table and know your worth going into the conversation. That's interesting. Okay. What the problem with this is that, and I've seen this happen, is that oftentimes if your employer catches wind of you talking to a headhunter or going looking elsewhere, it could skew their perception of your value. So there's so many things, I think between these two experts that are like kind of contributing to this article, I definitely believe that Carmichael has a holistic, congruent, and healthier approach on understanding, where that financial anxiety is coming from. I'm not a big fan of this Lundquist guy, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. Again, it's my soapbox, but whatever. Okay, so let's talk about the salary. So the money anxiety piece around salary is this. Okay, when you start money anxiety around salary, anytime you're thinking about your salary, okay, whether or not you're an entrepreneur or not, if you're talking about your salary and the salary's not enough or salary's too much, that has an interesting thing too. There's an interesting dynamic that has showed up one time with one of my clients in the past, where they felt inadequate. They felt they were being paid too much for what they were doing. And what happened was, over time, unconsciously started creating certain circumstances to kind of self-sabotage, so that would force her bosses to reevaluate their decision to pay her as much as they were paying her for the job that she was doing. Okay. And then there's so many different things that can happen. So when it comes to salary, okay, it basically turns out that if you understand all the different types of stories that we've heard and everything like that around money, anxiety around salary, you'll find that the money salary itself is not the problem. It's just it's almost like an activating piece. And the big piece, as Carmichael pointed out here, is because if you believe on some level that the value of the skills or the talents that you bring onto a situation is measured by the salary that's being paid to you, okay, then that in itself, that perception itself is going to could be a potential cause for financial stress, worry, and anxiety. Okay. How we flip that on its head is to understand what the purpose of salary is. Okay. From an entrepreneur standpoint, it's very strategic to pay as from if you're a business owner, you understand this is that yes, you do want to be competitive. You do want to pay someone salary. You want to pay just enough salary to retain an individual so the individual will stay motivated, financially excited to be in the company. Okay. I have yet to meet one successful entrepreneur that wants to overpay people, pay more than is it needs because they've got more things to think about. For them, it's paying for a specific service. So it's kind of like, when you go shopping for a plumber, when you go shopping for a electrician or someone to do work on the house, you're not going to just basically just go and just spend. I mean, there's a couple of things that you'll do is like you'll spend the money if it's worth it. If the person comes highly recommended, has demonstrated a high level of success and is very skilled at what they do, you don't mind paying a premium on it. But at the same time, if the person is saying, I'm $300 and, $300 for the thing and everybody else is charging $150, but this guy came highly recommended, you're not going to say, great, I'll pay instead of $300, I'm going to pay you $500. Okay. Just because you're so cool and just because I feel like it. If he says $300, even though you say it's expensive and he's worth it, you're not going to go about and argue and say, no, 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 don't charge me 300, charge me 500. I'm going to pay you 500. Okay. You want to make sure you understand the salary is a very strategic thing when it comes to a business. So it actually has very little reflection on the value of the individual, except for the fact that the more you pay, the higher chance that you're going to attract somebody who is very adept at what they're doing. And at the same time, it's a priceless commodity. I mean, to be able to say that the value that someone is putting their intelligence, their genius into helping your company grow, and a company does grow and it becomes successful, and it helps a lot of people, let's say, is there a price you could put on any of that? No. So we need to make sure we understand something is that the salary that you make is simply strategic. It's a strategic form of, bringing your talent into a company. Now, understanding that, it means that in order for you to increase your salary to do more, is to simply just do more of your genius. Make sure that when someone so me as an entrepreneur, if I bring somebody in and they look good on paper and they sound good in the interview and they start doing work and they're phenomenal and amazing, I would be inclined to give them more money. I would give profit sharing. I would give stock. I would actually create more motivation. And then at the same time, I would also sit down and have a conversation with that individual. Says, what is it that you ultimately want out of life? And see if me, being someone that pays this person's salary or as an owner, can contribute on some level to helping them get there. Okay. Salary is very much a strategic thing, and nobody should take it personally as this is a reflection of what I'm worth. It just depends on the company. You can take the most brilliant people. That's why people put sweat equity in companies. They're worth, $500,000 in salary, but then they still work for free for a while. And so you want to answer, well, why are they be willing to do that? They're not making any salary because they're investing their genius, into for a greater cause, for a greater end result. Okay. I hope that kind of makes sense to you. Okay. So when money anxiety around salary exists, just recognize, okay, first and foremost, how do you know to feel stress or worry around the specific circumstance around your salary? Okay. Because that's a learned behavior. Nobody's ever born into this world knowing to feel stressed or anxious or worried when it comes to your salary, either being paid not enough, which is usually the case, or being paid too much, which is rarely the case, but sometimes happens. Or just the fact that you're not getting more, you're not growing. Okay. when we start using money as a reflection of that, money's going to sit there. And if money was personified as a being, they'll be like, "Well, why are you blaming me for that? I have nothing to do with that. I have nothing to do with whether or not you're valuable, whether or not you have anything. I'm just here as a strategic instrument for a company and you as the salary recipient to leverage it for some greater good." Okay. So what you want to be is what you want to do then start being grateful that if salary or circumstances around salary is triggering you to feel anxious or stressful or worried, then you want to be grateful that, okay, great. Now money is actually bringing to light something I need to pay attention to. How do I know? How do I know to feel this way when it comes to my circumstances around my salary, around my income? Okay. And is this something that happens all the time, or is it certain times of the year, which is, like this time of the year, the holiday season coming up? Or is it periodically coming up all the time? Or is it once a month? What frequency is it coming up? Or is it just like a one-time isolated incident, which has even less to do with the money because it has to do more with, what is triggering, what money has brought up in you so that you can actually take care of it on an unconscious level. Okay. Especially if it's emotional and all these different things. What it does is it's bringing up an opportunity for you to resolve something deeper. And so you want to ask yourself, this is what our emotional release protocol is all about. It's like, how do you know to feel that way? Okay. Where did you first learn that? Okay. Who was the primary teacher? And this is a really important piece because if that who is still alive to this day, that you've identified as a teacher of this source of anxiety or stress and worry, then one of the best ways to do it is to have a conversation with that person and to just kind of get a deeper understanding of why that was taught to you, or why their behavior that you observed was so poignant and impactful that you decided to make it a reality in your life. Okay. We're starting to go into some really deep potential deep work that can happen by simply asking these questions, bringing things to light so that you can get a deeper understanding of what is really driving this problem, this challenge that you have around salary, around debt, around savings, any of those different things. Okay. So it's really, really important. And then when you are able then to define who it is, then you want to find out, how it was taught to you. Was it taught to you by what do you call? Was it traumatized into you? Was it lectured into you? Was it lovingly given to you as a loving lesson? Like, I love you, son. So make sure that you always stress about money. No, I don't think it was like that, but but I mean, it was like it'd be kind of like under the guise of love, because sometimes our parents teach us things that they knew. It's not like they have any malintent. They just think that that's the way to love, or maybe it was just observed. You observed what was going on, so you want to find out how you decided, how it was taught to you. Then the next thing that you want to ask is, how did you decide then to make that a truth so that you would adhere to it and grow up and integrate it into your adult life? Okay, so that's a really important thing to take into consideration as well. So, and then finally, when you get through all that, then you can finally get to the root of it all. Okay. You thoroughly get yourself asking those questions about your challenges around salary, your anxiety around salary, how much money you're making, how much money you're not making, everything like that. Figure out how you know to feel a certain way, how to respond, how to be triggered by a set of circumstances. Then you can find out when was the first time. And if you truly want to release a problem, release a challenge around money, anxiety, and problems in your life, you need to go to the original event that spurred it all, that started it all off. You take care of that. That's what we call the root. That's what we call, when you're taking out the weeds in the garden, if you just mow it over, they just keep growing back. Everybody knows this, but nobody really kind of realizes how pertinent this is to our own challenges in life. We have to go to the root, remove the root, and the rest of it just withers and dies. Does it die immediately? Probably not. And some people it will, and some people it won't. But if you just know that if you get to the root of it all, then eventually the the top part, the leaves and the weeds above the soil, will not get the nutrients that it need and will wither and fade away. And then you can just focus on developing an ideal type of circumstance above ground. Okay. So that's the whole thing about salary. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things on this article and stuff like that. There's stuff about, you know, lacking financial savvy, thinking that they don't know things about financials, debt. I mean, I think it's really, some days sit there and I think about how ironic it is that I'm talking about money and helping people with money because I spent so much of my life struggling around money. And I think that's for the exact same reason why I'm doing this. I'm passionate about it is because I was able to navigate that through the help of, books and mentors and teachers and coaches, and being able to piece together all those different lessons so that I can very precisely remove anxiety around money and stress and worry about money for me and and my clients and my students, that I'm driven to just continue to talk about this because it's a challenging thing. And if you've ever been stressed or worried about money, then yeah, this is absolutely relevant, and you probably should do something about it because and being in a high stressed lifestyle, unhealthy stress is really not good for your body. And if you have a family, you have kids, and everything like that, one of the things you want to think about is how long do you really want to be around, to be with your family, be with your kids, and be able to see them grow up and stuff like that. Okay, financial money anxiety plays that big of a role, and by resolving that in all aspects of our being, whether through savings or through salary or through job security and all those different things, we want to pay attention to it. We don't want to just sweep it under the rug and just take a new popular strategy or tactic or tool like a technology and think that that will solve the problem when the problem really has started from when we were much, much younger, when we were children, when we were kids. Get to the root of that. Okay. So I wanted to talk about that, and next week what we're going to be addressing is money anxiety around the holiday season, which is an annual thing. So I want to make sure I touch on it annually, just to make sure to remind everybody to how we can navigate through the holiday season, as it pertains to um, doing it with the least amount of stress and anxiety financially. Okay. And that will actually contribute us to each and every single one is to enjoy the holiday season a little bit better. So you make sure you want to tune in for that. Would love to hear your thoughts about how our Google Live Hangout went. I saw maybe a couple of viewers show up, but nobody really said anything. I'm not even sure how this works, so I'm going to have to talk to Jennifer about that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Would love to hear your thoughts about money anxiety around salary, or if you have it, or if you know someone that has it, and some of the behaviors that you notice about it, or what do you think the cause is around that, knowing that now the salary has nothing to do with the money anxiety, nothing to do with the financial stress and worry that people experience. And but and if you are suffering from that, again, I do have a book out there that's free, that you can download online, and you just go to go.thesixfigureacademy.com, and you get the book. It's called From Money Anxiety to Six-Figure Mastery, which is basically helping you understand how to eliminate money anxiety and how that translates to creating a six-figure lifestyle. Not just about making money, but about creating that lifestyle of your dreams that we've always wanted ever since we entered this workforce. Okay. Other than that, stay tuned for all the upcoming changes and everything. I don't think the brand's going to change too much, just maybe the name. And I would, again, love to hear from you. Love to hear any questions that you have. Post it in the video, post it on our Facebook page, post it on our Spreaker page, and our team will jump right on it and help you get those questions answered. Other than that, join us in the Money Lab on the Facebook group and have a phenomenal week. And we'll see you guys next week or hear from me next week when we talk about money anxiety in the holiday season, how to make sure you navigate around that without dealing with the challenges that come with it. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. For those of you who are online, awesome. See you guys.